Welcome everyone to today's inVantage Lightbulb Series discussion. I'm so excited to have Scott Rasmussen, the president of Lauber Business Partners, with me today, talking about some really key components of how he helps support EOS organizations and clients like you. So what I thought I would do is share just a little bit more first about where we are in the EOS model as we talk today. So remember, EOS is about strengthening the 6 key components of a business. We've got vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction are the 6 key components. And here today, we're going to talk about a couple of them that Lauber helps solve. So of course, on the people component, having right people, right seats, having the talent that you need to fuel your business is paramount in the world of EOS. We know that you can't achieve a great vision without great people. Now, the way we satisfy having the right people can come across in different ways. We're going to learn a few of the ways that Scott's team takes care of that for businesses. The other is helping solve some of the data and process issues that organizations face in situations where they may have a gap in leadership, and how we can approach that, how we can make sure that really strong, credible leaders join the organization to be able to root out issues through clear data, clear processes, based on bringing a lot of really credible experience to the group. So Scott, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. I'm glad to see that you're doing well, and hopefully you're having a good holiday season.
Good, thank you, Kelly.
All right, well, why don't we jump in? We want to get to know you a little bit more. So can you tell me a little bit more about your organization, maybe give an overview of Lauber Business Partners and what you do for your clients?
You bet. So Lauber Business Partners has been around since the 80s. It was founded by a gentleman named John Lauber. And at the time I was a banker. My background is I was a banker for 17 years at the old First Wisconsin. And as I worked with small and privately held companies, they often would be frustrated because the level of talent they had within their companies, particularly on the finance end, wasn't what they needed to take those next steps. So John's company I was familiar with, and what John had developed was this very unique model where he did something that all of us wish we could do, which is clone ourselves. John, by background, is a CPA and CFO, and he operated traditionally in a consultant model, but he said there must be an ongoing role for talent on an ongoing basis. And so he surrounded himself with very talented CFOs, CPA CFOs, and in this case, was able to put them into small privately held companies to help them grow. So just quick backdrop in terms of where I then went. I, in the late 1990s and early 2000, developed a outsource company for the HR industry. As I had worked with clients, it was always amazing to me because while businesses spend so much time on the processes associated with manufacturing and sales and finance and all the functions, if you would, it amazed me because what you should argue, human capital is the most important thing, is kind of like, oh yeah, by the way, and we have to have great people, but they really hadn't designed the systems and processes to help that. So I actually helped found and build an HR outsourcing company, which was known as Waterstone HR. And we grew that very nicely through the 2000s, providing mostly what I would call tactical HR, payroll processing, benefit administration. And then as we continued to grow, we added HR talent to provide to clients as well. That company grew very nicely, and I merged it with a larger company in 2011, and then left there in 2013 to form my own consultancy firm, which I did and still do some board work and things like that through that. And then I joined the Lauber team in March of 2019.
Great, good. Well, I remember I was a client of Waterstone back in the day, so our paths had crossed a while ago. You guys did amazing work for us, and I can appreciate how helpful that was. It allowed me to really focus on other parts of the business while having a great outsourced partner with me. So I'm always thankful to that team for the help that I needed at a critical time. So you're obviously a serial entrepreneur yourself, right? You just can't help yourself.
Right.
How did you pick the line of work you're in. Tell us a little bit about your desire to help other companies through your consulting firm as well as Lauber now. What is it that drew you to that as a profession?
Touched on it a little bit, but it was interesting because when I was part of the bank leadership team, they were very good at continual development of their leaders. So I was actually part of what was known as a management training program. So they really invested a lot in me as well as a lot of my colleagues to help us develop and grow into the best leaders we could be. So I was gifted, if you would, with this. It was a larger company, U.S. bank at this point, large company, largest bank in the state at the time, and they really invested in me as a manager and as a leader, and I really appreciated that. I still remember because along the way, and nobody's ever found this book, and I probably haven't found it. It's out of print now, but it was called The Age of Unreason by a gentleman by the name, I believe it was Charles Handy. And this is back in the 90s, way before, what I'm about to say, everyone's going to say, well, that's, of course, everyone would do this. But back then it was very unique, which was he designed this concept of a clover leaf where you had the core company and then you surrounded on the people side with different ways to, as we would call it, outsource. In our language now at Lauber, fractional is what we like to call that solution. So this whole concept of not having to think you quote unquote own all your employees, but can bring in different levels of expertise at different times as you need them is something that drove me. As I wrestled with my career in the bank got bigger and bigger and grew to the point where really being an entrepreneur was hard. And I always had that as part of me. My father was a very small business owner. I was always the person that tried to figure out how to do things and build things. It was just the way I was built. And so this concept actually was brought to me by a client in the engineering field that had done staffing, and they had this kind of one customer that did payroll for, and they said, well, what else can we do with this? So this whole idea of building this outsource model to help privately held companies grow is really what drew me into my entrepreneurship and pulled me out of a very good job. But it was such a great, almost open field, because at the time, the concept is still known as a professional employer organization. Nobody knew it. It was a very unique concept, but it was fun. And it's something I really enjoyed. And again, what it really addressed was people. Because again, a lot of people would nod their head because it sounds obviously so true, but EOS is so focused on this with some of their tools, which is people. It's all that matters. If you don't have that talent at the table as you're planning your company's growth, you stumble, you fall. So where I really learned this painfully, as we all do our lessons, if you would, was as I grew my own company, it was me at the beginning. I did everything. And I would bring in different levels of talent based on what I could afford at the time. It was literally a startup operation. At the end, we had grown to about $85 million in annualized revenue. So it was a pretty good operation. But I can tell you, particularly in the finance area, I probably undervalued that and put in people that candidly, and I often found out too late, they were over their skis.
Yeah.
I remember once we implemented a brand new payroll and ERP system, and my controller at the time quit on me midway through the project, and he never told me or came forward with the fact that he was struggling because he knew that he was over his head.
Mhm.
And it was tough. It was a tough time to one thing in the payroll business, you better make payroll. That's always very important. So to be able to jump in and keep it going was very, very difficult. So long story short, the entrepreneur journey really was from a large corporate into something I saw as this opportunity to grow. And then when I merged and sold it, it was really because in some ways I had taken it as far as I thought I should. And, it continues to grow and build. And I think that's an important lesson that through my own business focus matters I've tried to impart to owners, which is we all have our own skills and abilities. And I think one of the most important conversations we have is with ourselves, which is we can't do it all unless we figure out how to solve the space-time continuum and our cloning. You have to surround yourself with a team. And once I became comfortable with that and began to hire great people around me, and in our model, be able to bring in somebody, in this case, on a fractional basis, I can tell you my company just exploded and it really took the next level to where it is today, which is even a much larger organization without me in it, which is okay.
You know, super insightful is the fact that a lot of entrepreneurial organizations feel that they have to hire the talent that they can afford versus the talent they actually need. And the world of fractional, which is our new lingo for this business, is still new to so many organizations. They don't realize that you can actually find just the piece of talent you need and hire that and augment with other capabilities. So you're spending the right amount and getting the higher level of talent. So
Yep.
very insightful there. Um, when I'm working with clients on EOS implementation, we are doing a lot of work around creating the right organizational structure for them. It's actually where our journey starts together. Is you can't have and achieve a great vision if you don't have the right people and structure to get you there. So we start there, and inevitably we find that there's some sort of right people, right seat issues. Don't think I'll have come across a company, I can't think of any, that didn't have some issue, kind of like what you were sharing, is somebody just wasn't the right fit or got over their skis, as you said, and we need to help them, and they usually need help quick. So that's where I would reach out to you and your organization. So can you tell me some of the problems you solve inside your clients when your team comes in to provide support?
I probably didn't touch on everything we do, so I'll just briefly touch on that and focus on the one. Our history was finance and accounting. Since our new ownership team took over, John Lauber was sold the company 3.5 years ago to Julie Tolan and Mark Wiesman, who have subsequently added HR, human resources. And so I'll address in both those areas as I think about it. And we also have subsequently added coaching to our services. But some of the symptoms on the finance side, I start with the best description somebody ever provided me of what a great CFO does for you, which is really the talent we bring. In this case, we have about 38 CFOs, mostly at the point in their career where they don't need to work every day. They've had tremendous success, but they have a lot of energy and a lot to give, and they still want to work, and they have flexibility. So it's a great match where we can then match them up with people who need that level of talent, that kind of experience. So some of the symptoms they might see is, the best way I've heard it described is, a good controller, good accounting person looks backwards. Always, how did we do? How do you measure what we did? How do you account for what we did? The great CFO looks forward. Where are we going? What are the strategic issues we have to figure out? What are those questions that I, as an owner, might not even understand, particularly if your growth path includes outside financing, possibility of mergers and acquisitions, all the things that as we stair step our growth as companies, we need to address. And again, it would be rare for the person, particularly in the finance and accounting area, that got you to where you are today, to have that type of talent to be able to take you where your company's going as it moves forward. So these could include excellent forecasting tools. One of the things we're seeing right now as we talk to our centers of influence, there's some companies in stress right now. And I think in the banking community, even though the PPP program provided a real large tourniquet, at some point the reality steps in. It's like, do we have that core business model to be successful now moving forward? So do you have a great way to communicate to the bank through the way they understand, which would be 13-week moving cash flows, understanding great communication, how to communicate with your bankers? So those can be symptoms as well in terms of the financing, as well as just how do you build your capital, not your human capital in this case, but your capital for the business to grow. On the HR side, the thing that I often find interesting as companies grow, I touched on this earlier because that's really where I came up and helped push forward the idea of the company I grew, Waterstone, which is they undervalue human resources. And usually they just think of payroll administration and benefits and benefit administration. And they go, that's HR. And what and certainly just touched on with the EOS model, how do you take the people you have, the most important asset you own, and make it better, stronger, build it? And that's really where great strategic HR comes into play. So those two symptoms, I guess, on those two areas are the real key ones. And then just to briefly touch on the coaching model, which we've introduced in the last year, that's about how do you work with the team you have to make them better. communication challenges. And I'm sure you see that as you work through the planning processes that you do. And why is that person being so quiet in the corner? Why aren't they stepping forward? I think as owners, we all hope and wish that we have a highly effective team, but the reality is everyone's in a different spot in terms of their own abilities and confidence. So the coaching process hopefully helps them see their strengths, helps the team see the strengths of everybody, brings out the best of those strengths and makes them more effective in terms of leading your company forward. So those are the kind of symptoms that I certainly look for. Something, again, I haven't touched on, but we certainly do provide is where you also lose people. We can plug in interim talent. So let's just say, unfortunately, you get that, usually happens on Fridays for some reason, that call or email if somebody doesn't want to address you and says, hey, I'm on my way to my next opportunity. And you're like, oh, what do I do? This key finance position or human resource position needs to be filled. So we can step in and help for a longer duration, but interim, just for that. And then finally, I would be remiss if I at least didn't talk briefly. We also do search. Sometimes you want to find that true talent to help your company grow, and we can help in that area as well. So there's just some of the areas.
Well, it's really a full service talent set of solutions there when I think about it. So within the EOS world, it is very common that as we deal with the right people, right seats, or wrong people, wrong seats, those vacancies happen. Some of the other benefits that we see in our community around fractional leadership is those fractional leaders, as you mentioned, have a lot of experience, wisdom that they can impart, and they often help mentor and guide and coach some of the team that's still there. So there's an additional learning. It's not like they come in and have to sit in their little office by themselves. They're actually part of that leadership team. And in the EOS world, we get asked this often: an interim or fractional leader, if they're performing one of the roles on the accountability chart that is on the leadership team, they come and do EOS with that team. Even if they're not there for the long term, we have them participate, because at that point in time, they're providing that value. So we treat them as part of that leadership component as we're going through the EOS journey. And like I said, we hit the people stuff first. So it tends to be early. So teams like yours become part of the EOS implementation. So that's always a side benefit.
Glad you brought that up, Kelly, because if I could just touch on that just for a moment. Many times our customers, fear might be the right word, because they've, the current person in that seat, there's a relationship, particularly in the finance side. That's one of your trusted people in almost every company. So they kind of feel, boy, am I stepping on this person, and am I not giving them the opportunity? And to your point, what we have found is, particularly, again, the type of person we bring to the table, they end up as the mentor, as you just said, as the growth. It's not the type of coaching we do with our coaching practice, but mentoring would be the better word. And so I think for many owners, they might think, oh, would this hurt or blunt the ability for this person who I see this talent to grow? And I would say the talent that we bring to the table helps them grow. So I think that was a real nice pickup in terms of your thought in terms of how that works within the EOS model. And I should share with you, EOS is such a great, I know it's something you and I have talked about. It's a process I believe, and I think has some great traction. And many of our CFOs actually do serve exactly as you said, on that leadership team, sitting in the weekly and the quarterly meetings and working through the process. So they are very familiar with EOS.
Absolutely. And that's always helpful for us too, as we're the implementers, if we talk the same language. Last question for you is, what are some of the symptoms that a client might be experiencing before they even know they need your services? What are some of the things that percolate in a business that say, hey, we need Lauber's help?
Again, a great question. It's funny, and again, having run my own company, I can be totally empathetic to how this happens, and it's hard to define. Which is, you just get that sense, it's almost like a machine. There's a clunk that's just not working, right? And it's often you're like, gosh, I'm not just getting the information as quick as I should. I'm not getting the type of insight that I need. Or as a CEO, owner of the company, it seems like I'm always the one that's not only finding and identifying the problems, but oftentimes coming up with the solutions.
Mhm.
And there's this frustration that comes. And I just had this conversation the other day with a business owner, and it was exactly as I just said. I mimicked his words, which is, actually, he said something that I thought was very interesting. He said, Scott, I'm very good at hiring really nice people, but they don't challenge me. They don't challenge the organization. And he gave a quick story about a pretty significant six-figure purchase. And, for him, it was obvious that there could be some savings here. And why aren't you seeing this? Why aren't you yelling to the skies that this is an issue? This shouldn't be my job, right? I want somebody to have, I own this company, of course, he says, she says, but I want you to have that passion that you identify and care as much as I do. And in this case, he shared the story, and candidly, he was frustrated because he ended up almost diving in, negotiating, saving a good 5 figures. And he's like, no, 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 that's what I want the people around me to do. And the same thing in the HR world. Again, you just get that sense, why isn't my HR person, whoever that might be? And again, in fairness, and unfortunately, many companies, that HR person is like a controller. It's somebody who's, I often smiled at this when I was talking about my outsourced business, because there's a lot of gifts that we each have. And I would argue the gifting that's required to be a great HR person is very different than gifting to be a great accounting person. And yet many small businesses go, oh, you're a trusted person on my team, I'll give you this HR stuff. And yet they don't have the background. So again, it's that same kind of sinking, sneaking, it's not as good as it should be. What better could it be? And I think particularly in the HR world, again, I hear this so often. They've risen to the level where now they're on the radar for some things, compliance wise, or just talent wise. They're on the radar. So they better be thinking about this stuff. And oftentimes I hear, Scott, I don't know what I don't know. I need somebody to help me because of their experiences doing this, that actually can help me see and quote unquote teach me, show me what I don't know. So those are some of the real key symptoms I see. And briefly on the coaching side, I touched on a little bit, but we're big fans of Patrick Lencioni. And as a matter of fact, our coaching team has become certified with their latest Working Genius platform. And, I think I'll paraphrase him terribly, but, a great team will beat anybody, anytime, in any industry. And of course, he defines his material as the dysfunction of the team, right? And so the symptoms you might see is, again, communication's not happening, or the one I've seen so much in my life. And whether I'm advising customers or just even my own company, how do you really, especially nice people, we're all Midwesterners, we're all kind of nice. How can we hold each other accountable? I think it's a big breakdown without being defensive, really having that, think about sales and operations. There should be a natural tension there, but it doesn't have to be personal. You each should be able to elevate your issues, really hash things out, get things on the table, find the best solutions, and then move forward and hold each other accountability, which I know is all about the traction in the EOS model. But that same thing about Lencioni, and I think a lot of traction actually uses some of the Lencioni concepts, which is how do you really hold each other accountable? How do you handle conflict? It's a great thing. And again, the human resource world that strategic HR people help with. Conflict, nobody likes conflict. It's a rare person that truly likes conflict, right? So how are you going to address? Are you just going to hide in the corner and not say anything? Or are you actually going to bring it to the table? So these are the type of issues, again, within that coaching realm, as I think about it, that would be some of the symptoms that you see as a leader. That, I don't want to say we should create these debating type environments, but really there should be a good, healthy debate. And at the end of it, it should be, okay, we had it out. Now we're going to walk out of this room with a concise and clear message to the rest of the team and move forward.
In the work that we do, Scott, in EOS, it's a worrisome team that doesn't have some conflict or differing of opinions.
Exactly.
It's usually a different symptom of different issues, and one where services like yours end up being needed. The other thing is that when you talk about accountability, that just resonates with me, is as companies work through the EOS implementation, some of the things that we really focus on is how is the business run on data and information versus emotions or politics or or subjective information that often drives entrepreneurial businesses early on, and we move to a very objective, data-driven scorecard environment. And it's really hard to hide behind information from a performance perspective. It tends to bring that to the forefront. So we speak your language when we talk about accountability and creating the transparency of results, and teams like yours can definitely help get some of those best practices in place, making sure the right things are measured, because what gets measured matters in the business and will get the attention it needs. So very good.
You
Very
bet. You bet.
good. Well, I so appreciate the time that we've had together, and you've
Thank
shown
you.
your background, your story, which is amazing, and your journey to Lauber at this point. And I appreciate the fact that I'll be able to tap into you for my clients as we go through our EOS journeys together as well. It's a great complementary set of services and tools that we have together.
I agree. And I think your background and what you bring to the table with this model is outstanding, and certainly something that we're very comfortable working with you in every case that we can see good opportunities as well.
Good. We'll never be short of opportunities in entrepreneurial businesses. We both know that.
You bet.
New challenges. So, Scott, I thank you for your time today, and have a wonderful holiday season.
You as well. Thanks, Kelly.